Okay, today we're going to be talking about this little subject. How do you really handle a really bad day? Now, about a month ago, I guess it was when I was here, I believe Pastor Van was off lollygagging in Florida, and Lynn finally caught up to him a couple of days later. But we preached about the subject, if you all remember, about how the Bible 100% predicted everything that's going on today. Even I was amazed by some of those verses that we quoted about the last time I was here. All this stuff is just right there written down 2,000 years ago. So now the next thing is to talk about how you and me handle this stuff. Now I love this picture here with this little lady. Apparently, Eddie, if you had a birthday, you need to be careful. But now Matt and Jim don't have to worry about that so much. I don't think their hair is going to catch on fire like that. But anyway, how do we, and we're going to be talking a little bit about in Acts. We all know the story about Paul and Silas, but I'm hoping to have a little bit different take on the thing. Next slide. But first off, did you ever have a bad day and you know that you're going to have a bad day when you wake up and see Channel 4, Channel 5, and Channel 2 news trucks in your backyard? You also know you're going to have a bad day when you turn on the news and they're displaying the emergency evacuation routes out of the city. And finally, you know it's going to be when you arrive at work and your boss tells you don't even bother taking your coat off. Maybe you had a few of those. And the last one, you awaken in the morning and find a vulture outside your window. Now, guys, I can tell you, when we lived in Clarksville, Tennessee a few years ago, that literally happened. I went out the door of the apartment complex we lived in. There was no dead tree out there. I guess they were too cheap to remove the thing, and there was 3 of those critters on that tree. So I didn't know for sure what kind of day that was going to be. But that's what we're talking about. You know how it's going to be a bad day. Now, I don't know of a single person that's not had a bad day. And I don't know of a single person that's not had a good day. Life is a mixture of good and bad, a mixture of laughing days and crying days. That's just the way life is. Now, I wouldn't be surprised right now it's interesting because I always like to kind of greet people, when they come in, and sometimes they'd be all bubbly and like fantastic Van over here, he could be on his deathbed, he'd still be smiling and say fantastic and phenomenal, But then you talk to others, they say, well, I got this morning, looked at it, and I was still looking down at the daisies, not up the daisies. So, there's all kinds out there. But I wouldn't be surprised when he right now is saying, I know what you're talking about, this bad day thing. And, one of those days, I'm just having one of those days. We've all had those things. I think a couple of weeks ago, Gene and I both, I don't know why, like somebody laughed about us having the Rocky and Gene thing, but that's just the way we are. We are just mated together by God eternal. And we started off and something went wrong. I don't know, the coffee maker didn't go off for something. Of course, to me, that's major. To her, it's nothing, But all day long, stupid stuff kept going wrong. It was just one of those days. And one of those days is when it's obvious that things are not going to go well. One thing after another just keeps going wrong. The dog bites you, have a flat tire, just whatever goes on. And that's just the way it is. You just want to go hide in the closet or climb under the bed or something like that. And we're going to talk a little bit about now, speaking of bad days, we're going to check on Paul and Silas in Acts chapter number 16. But first, let's pray. Dear Lord, gracious Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for this opportunity to preach your word. And Lord, I just want to ask now that you'll let me step aside, the Holy Spirit step in this pulpit and be the one that delivers this message. And Lord, I just want to ask that you subdue the devil. If the devil's going to try to step in and make something go wrong with this service, Lord, just lock him away that he won't bother us, that everybody can get the message about what they need to hear about how to handle a bad day through you. Okay, starts off the chapter with verse number 16. And now, by the way, this is Dr. Luke talking. He was with Paul all the time. And he said, one day as we were going down to the place of prayer, we met a slave girl who had a spirit that enabled her to tell the future. And she earned a lot of money for her masters by telling fortunes. Little side note here. If you guys, any of you folks were still silly enough to read the horoscope or to actually go to fortune tellers, have your tarot card read, all that kind of stuff, remember the devil's involved in that stuff. That's scary. Don't do that. Continue. She followed Paul and the rest of us, shouting, "These men are servants of the Most High God, and they have come to tell you how to be saved." And then next, this went on day after day until Paul got so exasperated that he turned and said to the demon within her, "I command you in the name of Jesus to come out of her," and instantly it left her. Now, I pondered this whole thing because here Paul and Silas are in town trying to reach folks for the Lord, and you got this girl preaching a free sermon. She'd go along there saying, these guys got it, man. They know how to have you saved. But I think the problem that Paul had was that it was coming from the wrong source. It was coming from the wrong source. And I don't know, maybe she had like this really whiny old screechy voice to her, like fingernails on a chalkboard or something. But nonetheless, he finally had enough and he drove that spirit out of her. Now, interesting thing is, the very last there it says, "and instantly left her." It didn't wait till they went and bathed in the pool of Siloam. It didn't wait till they sent a tithe in the big church. It instantly left her. And I just think that is so interesting. Now, her master's hopes of wealth were now shattered. Apparently, there must have been something about her countenance where they knew that she just wasn't the same, which is the way usually we are too when you accept Lord or you're cured. They grabbed Paul and Silas, dragged them before the authorities at the marketplace, and the whole city's, and they told the old magistrate, the old dude with the big robes and the white wigs and all that stuff, the whole city's in uproar because these Jews, they shouted to the city officials, are teaching customs that are illegal for us, being Romans, to practice. Interesting thing here, folks. They didn't tell them that they had taken away their living. They didn't tell the magistrates that they had cured that lady. She couldn't tell fortunes anymore. They threw this thing up about they're teaching stuff that it's illegal for us to hear. Isn't that interesting? We hear that kind of stuff all the time out of the world, even now today, about especially. We were watching some stuff the other day, and I get Trains magazine all the time. They had an article about this train that goes from Tibet from China to Tibet. That thing's at 14,000 feet. It has to have, the cars are actually like an airplane. It has to be pressurized. But anyway, Gene was reading that thing and was talking about it's illegal for Christians to say anything in China. They will put you in jail for a long, long time just saying the word Christ. And this is the kind of thing that they were going on there. If they knew their big bucks had been taken away, next slide, they knew there'd been. So a mob quickly formed against Paul and Silas. Now, there's two kinds of folks you read about this stuff. You have this old mob. You got these old religious zealots that are mad because they don't believe in Jesus. They want to hear this stuff. And then you always had these old ne'er-do-wells hanging off there just waiting to make an easy buck. And so they quickly get this mob, and they drag him before the city officials. The city officials order them stripped and beaten with wooden rods. Now, guys and girls, all they've done at this point is save the soul. All they've done is cured a person that was tormented by a demon. And for that, what happens to them? They wind up getting dragged before the jail and beaten. And then it says they were severely beaten, and then they were thrown into prison. The jailer was ordered to make sure that they didn't escape. Next one. And so the jailer put them in the inner dungeon and clamped their feet in stocks. That's pretty severe just for driving a demon on somebody, guys. I mean, let's get real here. They put him in the inner prison. Some of you folks know I used to work at Brushy Mountain Prison up in East Tennessee. I was up from James Earl Ray escape and all that stuff. Well, they had an inner prison up there, which by the time I went to work there was illegal for them to use. But you go way down these old steep stairs down this place, and they had these little windows about this big that they would look out of, but didn't it good because 3, 4, 5 feet across and way up another 5 feet was a little tiny window, just a little bit of light in. I envisioned this is the kind of place they had them in, the inner prison in stock. And they're cold, and they're beaten, and they're thirsty, and this situation looked terrible. Next slide. But what we want to look at for just a moment now is how the Bible offers things for another day. The first thing that we understand here, and we've seen is, being a disciple of Jesus does not mean that you're going to be protected from harm. A matter of fact, in this day and age, it's probably more and more likely that being a disciple of Jesus, you're going to get whacked on the head by somebody, either verbally or realistically. You know, we talked the last time I was up here, we talked a lot about the COVID-19 virus and things like that. And, you know, the virus doesn't discriminate, Christian, Muslim, whatever. Crime doesn't. You know, we've seen all this crazy stuff we've never seen before, all these peaceful protests for the rioting and stuff like that and burning in cars and things like that. It doesn't matter what your persuasion, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, they have destroyed black businesses in black neighborhoods. And so this stuff here doesn't discriminate against us. And because of we are in this world, you know, we're going to be subject to that stuff. God does not put this bubble about us. It'd be nice if he did, I guess, but he did not put this bubble about us so we can just walk through all this stuff and the bullets bounce off and all that stuff like that. It doesn't happen. And also, another thing that I noticed by this whole thing here was that people are by nature are selfish, and they'll go to great lengths to protect themselves and their stuff. In this particular case, they were angry because the girl, you know, they wanted to protect that girl. Of course, the thing about it is they don't realize that by this time it's too late. I don't think the demon's going to come back into her. Way back in March, you remember, I don't know if it's Pastor Van or somebody that sent me this picture of the empty toilet paper rack at Walmart and it said the great toilet paper rapture. Well, all this crazy stuff was going on, you know. Well, there was a Walmart where, and I don't know why a man thought he needed a half dozen gallons of distilled water. But he had to send the cart, the cart was just full with this gallon jug of distilled water. And a little lady came up, she said, "Mister," she said, "my husband desperate needs that distilled water for his medical equipment. Can I have this 1 gallon? And he cussed her out. He told her, "Go, this is mine. You know, you can't have that gallon of water." What a terrible response. But you know, if you remember, some of you folks did, the last time we met, I spoke about what is saying in Matthew 24:12. Jesus said, "In the last days, sin will be rampant and the love of many will grow cold." You know, you've never seen such a cold time as now, where people are hating each other everywhere. It's even crazy. You know, we drive, most of you folks know we come over from Murfreesboro, and we have a fervent prayer before we leave because I-24 is like a combat zone anymore, except you don't get combat pay, you know. It's crazy out there. But this guy, I submit to you, this guy's love for a fellow man had grown cold. I have no idea why the cluck needed 6 gallons of distilled water, but his love has grown cold because he didn't even share one of those things. Finally, we see that when we serve others in the name of Jesus, that ministry won't be welcomed by everyone. Why you Jesus freaks? Always around here, you know, stirring up stuff. Go away. My beer sales are going down. So we're not always going to be appreciated. Sometimes we think that, but we're not going to be. And that was certainly the case for Paul and Silas. And this is true for today. So we're going to look at a few things here. Next slide. When you face a crisis, you're going to have to make some choices. One is to choose worship over worry. John 16:33 says, "I've told you all this so that you may have peace in me." Guys, I could end right there. That is such a wonderful promise right there. I've told you that you can have peace in Jesus. Here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows. No kidding. But take heart because I have overcome the world. Guys, that's all. That's it. That's the sermon right there. Jesus has overcome the world. He offers us peace and God. So and then finally, well, we're not quite ready for that yet. Paul and Silas had reason to worry. They were outsiders. They came to the city, caused up all this trouble, had all the businessmen at them. They were arrested. No Miranda rights, no attorneys. They didn't know what was going to happen to them. But what did they do in that jail? You saw the last picture we saw. They were in there all bound up, beat up, bloody, hands in stocks and everything. And what they decided to do, they made a decision not to focus on the what ifs and to focus on the what is. That's what they did. They consciously chose their mindset to be set on Jesus and not worry about what they didn't know. You know, we can't, you know, we spend so much time worrying about things. like Ziggy, what is it, Chicken Little? Was it Chicken Little was the one that he's always worried about the sky falling and everything else going? I know people like that, and they drive me crazy. 500 years ago, there was this little French guy named Michael de Montaigne, and I looked that up to make sure I'm saying it right, Mr. PhD. He said, my life has been filled with terrible misfortune, most of which never happened. We spend more time worrying about junk, and it works out, or just never happened. And a couple of years ago, there was a study. I love these universities. They have time on their hands, so they get money of these grants, and they go out and they do these massive studies. And they decided that whoever this was at said 85% of the things that the people worried about never happened, and the other 15% they couldn't control anyway. So that means that 85% of the time you're going to be okay, So the next thing, so that's the bullet there, is worship over worry. Instead of sitting there wringing your hands and staying up all night and walking the floor and having to get an Alka-Seltzer, get on your knees and use a little bit of knee power. The next one is when you face a crisis, you need to choose faith over fear. Now that can be pretty tough. If you're a little old 160-pound guy, yeah, 160, yeah, that's about 160. I'm not lying. 160-pound guy like me, and you're stuck in a room with a 500-pound gorilla, or maybe like a 3,000-pound moose that's blind and in a bad mood. It's a bit hard not to worry about things. When Paul and Silas, though, was thrown out of prison, they didn't know what was going to happen to them. And I'm sure they knew by this time that some of their fellow disciples had been killed for this outreach for God. And it undoubtedly crossed their mind that that happened to them too. The Bible is full, though, of commands about do not fear and do not worry. But how many times do we listen to those do not fear, do not command things? We're natural people. We just want to worry and fear about things. And we know, like we talked about a month ago, this COVID-19 thing was a big focus in, but we still have accidents, we have crime, we have disease, not just COVID-19, there's lots of other stuff out there too that can happen. And all those things are covered by, next slide please, in Psalm 46, 1 and 2, probably the great King David wrote, God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. Is that not cool? Is that not cool? God is our refuge and strength and always ready to help us. You know what the problem is? We don't ask. We don't ask. And men are the worst. Because from this, yeah, I'm talking about you. Well, next time, sit on the back row. So I'm left-handed, so I just look this way, But from day one, what'd your dad say? Pull yourself up your bootstraps and be a man, son. You're gonna have to be an island of your own. And we have a tendency to want to be that stuff, but we don't have to be, because the psalmist said, God is our refuge and our strength. And then he goes on and says, so we, who's we? Y'all. The southern term, y'all. That says, so y'all will not fear when earthquakes come and mountains crumble into the sea. Has anybody ever been in an earthquake here? They're pretty scary. I've been a couple of little tremors, and that was bad enough. They're pretty scary stuff. So maybe sometimes that's easier said than done. But God says, do not fear those things, because, and I know it's a terrible thing, but if you're a born again, prayed up Christian, then if the big rock does fall on your head, then you know where you're going. So that's a good thing. Okay, the next one is when you face a crisis. First off, we had worship over worry, faith over fear. The next is prayer over panic. Prayer over panic. There used to be a silly old cartoon called Eek the Meek. It's about the silly old mouse, and he was always in a big panic about everything. Warning, warning, going crazy thing. But Paul and Silas were in jail. They were praying and worshiping instead of panicking. Now, if I'd have been in that case, I might have been panicking, but they didn't do that. Of course, the Bible has a whole bunch to say about prayer. New Testament alone, there's 250 different places where it mentions prayer. And I got just a few. The first one is Matthew 7:7. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek, you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. You know, that can be a very difficult verse because the main thing is it has to be what you're focusing on. You're asking and seeking and knocking. If you're asking for that Mercedes Benz and that 3,000 square foot home and $100 million in the bank, probably ain't going to happen, you know. So knock it off, Eric. But he says, ask and it'll be given to you. I cannot tell you how many times I've asked God and sought about things, you know, and sometimes he's pretty slow. You know, he takes his own time. That's what's irritating me. I'm a type A plus. I want to get stuff done yesterday, you know. But he says, seek, be given, find, knock, and it'll be open to you. The next one is Mark 9:29, and he said, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. Now, this was Peter talking about demon possession. But I submit to you that also this verse can say, and I don't think I'm taking out of context, there's a lot of things that you cannot deal with except through prayer. A lot of things, you know. Once again, back to the old man, the old who old man thing. You know, we want to solve all of life's problems ourselves. You know, but some things cannot be solved by any way except through prayer. We all need to have calluses on our knees, you know, but none of us do. So the next one is Acts 9:40. Peter put them all outside, knelt down and prayed. The next point about that is, you know, sometimes we just have to throw everything out the door. We got to throw the kids out the door. We got to turn off the TV, turn off the computer, turn off the cell phone, you know, lock your mother-in-law in the closet and pray, because you've got to get rid of those distractions. And while I think a lot of time we have a tendency we're trying to have our prayer time, and we got the cell phone over here buzzing and the computer and the TV, and, you know, and he says, he put them all outside and knelt down and prayed. And then Ephesians 6:19 says, pray for me. That could be the end of comment. And you all need to pray for me. You all need to pray for Pastor Van. You all need to pray for Lynn back there. In fact, you all need to pray for everybody in this room. But he said, pray for me and ask God to give me right words so I can boldly explain God's mysterious plan and the good news. See, that's one thing. We do not want to miss any opportunities ever to tell people about God. Never. And I always tell, and I remember years ago, and I was still a technician out there in National Guard. You know, I was out there pumping gas on airplanes. And I had a young man that one of our part weekenders was talking about some stuff. And I said, well, and after we finish up fueling up this truck here, we'll go inside and I'll pray with you. Well, he got a call. We hadn't finished up. Harmon sent somebody else out and replaced him, and the guy left. I never saw him again. And that's bothered me for years that I should have stopped that right then and prayed for that guy right then and there. Do not miss those opportunities to pray for folks. Some of you probably heard of Corrie ten Boom. She was a famous Jewess that went through a lot of stuff. She said, don't pray when you feel like it. Make an appointment and keep it. And there's a group called the Hollanders used to have a song that said, when you don't feel like praying, pray. When you don't feel like it, that's when you need to, because more than likely you got the devil over here going, you know, and you don't even know what's going on. So we obviously need to pray all the time, not just when we face a crisis, but certainly we need to pray for ourselves during this time right here. And the next one is, when you face a crisis, you need to be a messenger of hope. Churches are messengers of hope, but individuals can be those messengers even more so than churches. And it's interesting, I've heard 2 or 3 comments this morning making about the Facebook stuff, you know, and make sure this is right and all that sort of thing like that. There was a church, and I do not remember where it was. There was a lady who had been watching a Tennessee church living in Florida. She accepted the Lord watching that Facebook stuff on her computer, drove 700 miles from Florida up here to be baptized. Now, is that not amazing? So don't tell me that this old tech stuff doesn't work, because if the tech stuff works, then the message works, you know. But don't tell me it doesn't work, you know, because it's so wonderful. A lot of people have been confronted with a lot of things that's never happened before. I mean, people died, you can't go to a funeral home. Grandpa has a stroke and you can't go to the hospital. It's awful. Somehow we have to be able to help those people, get them through that stuff. So let's make sure that we as messengers of hope are there for folks. Don't turn them off. Gene will tell you, like sometimes we go to the military commissary down in Tullahoma, and I have to be careful because I'll see these old gentlemen that wear the hats that says Creed and all stuff like that. You say one word, you're going to get a 30-minute story that gets bigger and bigger all the time about their stuff, But if you see somebody there that you obviously can tell is hurting, it'd be a good time maybe to be that messenger of hope for them, Don't turn them off like that. And we're all in new territory and all this stuff. It's not quite as new now, but it's every day. I mean, now you got the president sick with the stuff and a bunch of politicians are sick with it. And I'm still a school teacher. And we had one class, I think it was Riverdale, where they got a whole class quarantine now because one student tested positive stuff. So that teacher and those 25 students all had to be quarantined for 2 weeks. It's crazy. There's stuff you never heard of before. About a month or so ago, I guess, Gene and I was hanging out in Bell Buckle. Everybody been to Bell Buckle? Neat little town. And I'm a people watcher. Well, she's even worse than I am. She'll say, "Did you see what kind of socks that person had on?" I'm like, "No." So maybe I should say we're both people watchers, but she's a micro people watcher. Well, anyway, there's this old guy standing we're in front of the Bell Buckle Cafe, and this guy is standing over about 50 feet away, and he's got a beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and a belly that's 3 feet in front of him, And he's got a T-shirt on that says, "Life is short, so party hard." Yeah, well, right. You're right. So, likely living that life life will be way too short. But I liked another perspective from a gentleman that's sitting in this church right now that wears this little black vest all the time. And on his vest, he has a patch that says, "Life is short, so pray hard." Party hard or pray hard. Worldview or Christian view. That's what we got to decide on. I just love that story. Next verse. So next slide, sorry. That is it? Oh. Keep going. There we go. One more. Okay, there we go. See, we left off way back about 20 minutes ago, verse number 24, and I bet you thought I forgot about verse number 25. But I didn't. Because, see, this is the most important verse of this whole thing. It says in Acts 16:25, at midnight they, Paul and Silas, were praying and singing, and the other prisoners were listening. What would we have been doing? Why me, Lord? What did I do? When I was in basic training, we had a thing I called the spider web. I like basic training, man. 3 meals a day and clean socks. What can I say? But people looked like I had a big spider. I want to go home. Well, these guys could have been that way. They could have been, why me, Lord? What did I do? But they didn't. It says they were praying. And how about that? No whining, no complaining, and just singing. What do you think? You have no idea what they were singing? I think I know, and I think you know the words to it. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. There's just something about that name. Master, Savior, Jesus, like the fragrance after the rain. Kings and kingdoms will all pass away, but there's nothing about that name. That's what they were singing. But the only frustration I have about this whole thing is that Dr. Luke did not go on and tell if any of those convicts that were listening got saved. But if you know the rest of the story, you know that the jailer got saved and his whole family got saved. And they got baptized, and I'm not sure how that process happened. Maybe they had an old pool they'll put the convicts in or something, but they all got baptized, and then they were Baptist for sure because they had a meal. But what a great story. What a great story about how to handle a bad day. Because Paul and Silas handled that bad day the right way. Just look what happened to them. And then after all this stuff went on, the next day the old magistrate came and said, these old boys didn't do nothing wrong, let them go. And the jailer says, oh, great. Now, I've got a torn up jail I got to explain to, you know. But anyway, so they went on their way. You know, and so I wonder about how would you guys handle your bad day? That's why I want you to just think about that the rest of the day, how you'd handle your bad day.